Okay, so we're starting a new lesson today, and the topic is poisonous attitudes, and that's going to be the main overall topic, and the subtopic is going to be for this week the dismissive attitude. And just to get started, the definitions. So when I started this, it's always good to know what you're going to talk about, and for you guys to understand it as well. So the definition from the book is showing arrogant, offhanded disregard. And other definitions are feeling or showing that someone is unworthy of consideration. So with that being said, when I was starting this, it was like a few months ago when I read it, I was like, okay, I didn't really see it. I'm like, this is not for me. You guys know it when we do the little lot, you get the book that is for you. So, or that you're gonna need in the future. So when I started reading this, I was like, this is totally off topic. It has nothing to do with me. Well, it did, but also like with people I have come across. So it kind of worked out. It was a mutual way. So in order to have dismissive attitude, it's either verbal cues or nonverbal cues. So you could be very rude to someone and be verbal about it, or you could do nonverbal cue, which is the next picture, which is pretty much you could either have text with someone or have a conversation and automatically roll your eyes. I know we don't do it anymore, but like talk to the hand, that one, Or in the picture with the mom and the daughter is you could straight out tell that the daughter does not want to hear anything the mother's saying. So there's that too. And I know sometimes right now with the mask, we gotten so used to having the mask that we forget the facial expressions we make. So I know I caught myself doing that sometimes. You make faces and then you forget you have the mask on. And I know sometimes it could be like, oh, they can't tell, but people could still tell, even with masks on. So we have to be careful with that as we dive more into this. Because sometimes, even though we don't tell them, what we do with our facials could hurt someone's personal, like their values or just themselves as it is. So one way we could be dismissive in the next slide is there's two approaches to why someone may have a dismissive attitude. The first one is it's unreliable source. So what I'm trying to say is sometimes the person that is going to come at you and he wants to tell you something or you're not going to want to hear it from them because first of all, they're not unreliable. You can't trust them, and whatever they have to say, you don't believe it. So that's why some people are dismissive towards others. So an example is when someone does not have his or her facts right or attempt to make an argument, she or he could not produce any concrete evidence for. So sometimes that happens. The second why one may be dismissive is an emotional trigger. So meaning either you're dismissive towards the individual because of the issue, not technically because of the person, but more over the issue itself. So you're just, whatever the issue may be, you just don't want to hear it. You straight up cutting off the person because it's not about them, but it's about the issue they're trying to talk about. And the second thing is negative feelings about the person, making the requests or just a statement overall. Sometimes it may just be the person and you're being dismissive towards them. So for instance, for me, I know I caught myself with the emotional trigger, and it was about the person. So a few months ago, someone very close to me would talk to me, and I was straight out, my face was, don't talk to me. And I was very rude. And it was more like every time this person would come to me, I just didn't want to talk to that person. So I was very dismissive, and this was bad because little by little, you see it. At first, I didn't see it at all, that I was being dismissive and rude, but you feel it in yourself. I caught myself that my behavior was wrong since I noticed that it was changing who I was towards the person, and I was being someone not Christian, someone that wasn't Christ-like, because I was being very rude and not the person I was before because a certain situation happened that made me not want to talk to that person. So it was an emotional trigger, so I was very dismissive. So when I was doing this, I noticed and I thought about that. Now I'm more like I could have a conversation with that person and I'm better, But it took some time because I had to ask God to help me because I knew and I saw that my heart was getting hardened with that certain individual, since it was something, it wasn't supposed to happen, but my heart was very hardened and I didn't want to talk to that person or address that person. So I was being the dismisser and with that certain person. But sometimes it happens where we don't catch ourselves being the dismisser, or sometimes we catch someone being a dismisser and we're supposed to address them and let them know. Sometimes they're not aware of it. I know it happened to me. I wasn't aware of it until a bit later, and I noticed that I was being not who I was supposed to be. It was changing me. But it took time for me to get to the point where right now I could talk to the person. I have a better relationship. It just took a lot of not just myself, but giving it to God and allowing Him to help me with the situation. And with that being said, we're going to talk about the story of Nabal and David, which is in 1 Samuel chapter 25. And this is going to be more about we're going to read into it, but it's going to be more addressing like the whole situation about the dismissive attitude. So you guys are going to see more of it right now. So we're going to start in verse 10, where it says, "Who is this fellow David?" Nabal sneered to the young man. "Who does this son of Jesse think he is? There are lots of servants these days who run away from their masters. Should I take my bread and my water and my meat that I've slaughtered for my shears and give it to the band of outlaws who come from who knows where?" So David's young man returned and told him what Nabal had said. "Get your swords," was David's reply as he strapped on his own. Then 400 men started off with David, and 200 remained behind to guard their equipment. Let me apologize. There was a background I was supposed to give you guys. I just saw my notes. I forgot to give you that. So let me jump back and we'll read it again. So the background is Nabal was a very rich man who lived in a city some distance from where he sheared, which is just cut off the wool from the sheep. During David's time of fleeing the wrath of King Saul, he and his 600 men camped near where Nabal's shepherds tend his sheep, providing a wall of protection for them. Later, when they needed supplies, David sent an individual to ask Nabal to help him out and to remind him of how they had protected his flock and his shepherds. Nabal responded like a fool, his name meant. So that's where we read verse 10, where it was like, Nabal was like, "Who is this person?" Like he didn't address the situation right. He was very dismissive, as in like, "Who is this person? Like, I don't want to know about it," type of thing. And in the following verses, in verse 14, it says, "Meanwhile, one of Nabal's servants went to Abigail and told her, 'David sent messengers from the wilderness to greet our master,' but he screamed insults at them. 'These men have been very good to us, and we never suffer any harm from them. Nothing was stolen from us the whole time they were with us. In fact, day and night, they were like a wall of protection to us and the sheep. You need to know this and figure out what to do, for there is going to be trouble for our master and his whole family. He's so He's so ill-tempered that no one can even talk to him.' Abigail wasted no time. She quickly gathered 200 loaves of bread, 2 wineskins full of wine, 5 sheep that had been slaughtered, nearly a bushel of roasted grain, 100 of clusters of raisins, and 200 fig cakes. She packed them on donkeys and said to her servants, 'Go on ahead. I will follow you shortly.' But she didn't tell her husband Nabal what she was doing. As she was riding her donkey into the mountain range, she saw David and his men coming towards her. David had just been saying, 'A lot of good it did to help this fellow. We protected his flock in the wilderness, and nothing he owed was lost or stolen. But he has repaid me with evil for good. May God strike me and kill me, even if even one man of his household is still alive tomorrow morning.'" So right here, what ended up happening was David was very upset with Nabal, since Nabal was dismissed the man that David sent out to the village. He was like, who is this person? I don't want to talk about it. So we have to understand that when we're being dismissive, it brings consequences. So the consequence here was that David was going to kill everybody. But in future verses, what ends up happening was that Abigail packed all the loads of bread, as we saw in verse 18, and she goes out and talks with David and pleads for her husband to forgiveness and to understand what had happened, that she didn't know about it, but to forgive them. What ends up happening is that she saves her whole household, so which was good, but she had to do that because Nabal was being very dismissive towards the person that David sent. And when she goes back to the house, she finds Nabal having a party. He's all drunk, and she ends up telling him the following day, like the day after that, that she went towards David and that she ends up saving them. Due to his consequences, he ends up having a paralysis and he ends up dying a bit after that. And then the story continues to other stuff. But just more of the story, it's like he was being dismissive, and the consequence was that his whole entire family was about to die. But Abigail, being a good wife, she saved them all. Another story where we see a different perspective of, we're going to see three groups right now. We're going to see, you guys all heard of this story. It's very famous, the story of the woman caught in adultery, which is in 1 John 8, 1 through 11, and I'm pretty sure you guys have all heard it. So it's pretty, I know I've heard it a couple times, so we're going to repeat it and we're going to find out more. But three groups. The first group is the woman caught in adultery. The second is everybody else that was there. And the third is Jesus. And we're going to see how each of them responded, and we're going to see who was the dismisser and who was not. It's a different point. So we're going to start reading in verse 8, which is, Jesus returned to the mountain of Olives, but early the next morning he was back again at the temple. A crowd soon gathered, and he sat down and taught them. As he was speaking, the teachers of religious laws and the Pharisees brought a woman who had been caught in the act of adultery. They put her in the front of the crowd. Verse 4 says, "Teacher," they said to Jesus, "this woman was caught in the act of adultery. The law of Moses says to stone her. What do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something they could use against him, but Jesus stooped down and wrote in the dust with his finger. They kept demanding an answer. So he stood up again and said, "All right, but let one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Then he stooped down again and wrote in the dust. And then it says, when the accusers heard this, they slipped away one by one, beginning with the oldest, until only Jesus was left in the middle of the crowd with the woman. Then Jesus stood up again and said to the woman, "Where are your accusers? Didn't even one of them condemn you?" "No, Lord," she said. And Jesus said, "Neither do I, and go and sin no more." So right here we already see that there's a different perspective. If you guys remember, there was two approaches. One was an emotional trigger, and the second was like an unreliable source, why someone may be dismissive to a certain individual or a group of people. And the second was an emotional trigger, so it was just the issue itself. They were being dismissive towards the woman of who she was because she was caught in adultery. Whereas Jesus, he shows us how we should really be. He was like, if you guys have never sinned, throw the first stone. And it shows like we're all sinners and no one's perfect, so we shouldn't be judging someone. We should act in the way of love, as Jesus did. So instead of being dismissive as well, if you see others being dismissive, we shouldn't be like that. We should be who Jesus wants us to be, in a way. So right here, it was like they were all being dismissive towards her, but Jesus showed us how Jesus is an example of how we should act and how we should do. And there's other stories as well where we see this. And you guys may be asking, why do we have to learn about the dismissive attitude? Like, you guys might not be like doing it yourself, but maybe later on you guys may come across someone. So why is this important? In the next slide, when you're being dismissive or have a dismissive attitude, it could cause a misunderstanding. It could hurt someone's feelings, or it could create a conflict. It could make someone not feel valued or respected, destroy trust and safety, which can harm relationships. So when you're being dismissive, it could send out the wrong message to someone and be, maybe, let's say I was dismissive towards, to Kat, and I was like, oh, you're trying to tell me something, and I'm like straight out, be like, I don't want to hear it, I'm cutting you off right away, which is, I'm being dismissive, I'm the dismisser, so that could cause like conflict. You might think that it's because something that you did, and it probably had nothing to do with you. Probably I just had a bad day and I'm being dismissive towards you. So it could cause like a misunderstanding, or it could just hurt you. You could feel like, what did I do? Did I do anything? Because I haven't done anything. So it could be like, it could give the mixed signals, which could affect our relationship, how we are. And it could feel like, for instance, another situation, like, they say we're working on an activity, and we generally have meetings, right? And let's say someone comes up with an idea, and I'll be the dismisser since it's easier to point that out. I'm up here. So it's like, they say Jason comes up with an idea, and he's like, I think we should do this. And I'm straight out going to be like, Jason, no, please don't bother. I'm being really harsh on him and being a dismisser, because first of all, he's going to think, you know what, I'm not even going to say anything anymore. I'm already hurt. And, Jason's going to be upset. And he's going to be like, you know what, he's not going to feel valued. He's going to feel like he doesn't have that level where he could feel free to advocate and express how he feels. So it's going to be, in a way, not an unsafe environment, but like, yeah, an unsafe environment, because he's not going to feel comfortable talking to anybody, since I had showed a dismissive attitude. So how should we respond? Instead of being like, that won't work, you should be more, thank you for your input. You have to consider the other person, because that person's going to just think of, oh, your issues is insignificant to me, your opinion or feelings doesn't matter to me, or overall, where you're telling me, I don't care. So it could be very rude, and also it could hurt that person, since we're not being who we're supposed to be. So with that being said, what should we do instead? So like how we saw in the first one, Abigail, she noticed the behavior, and she saw it was the wrong behavior. So she set out and she fixed the situation and saved her whole household. If you see someone if you see it, you're supposed to point out their behavior, because sometimes they could be unaware of it. I know I wasn't aware of my situation. I felt it in myself, and I saw it as well. But if you see someone, point it out. And also, but in a way, point it out in a nice manner, in a gentle way. Don't be too harsh, because then you're kind of doing the same thing, But another way is try listening to the person before. Let's say you already don't agree with the topic. You're going to have to listen to the person, because if you're going to, sorry, let me pick it back. Okay, so if, since the beginning, if you don't agree with them, just listen to them. Maybe after hearing their perspective, you're going to be like, you know what? You're right. I agree with you. Or you could be like, you know what? I heard you, but I don't agree with you. I think it should be like this, but say in a nicely manner. Because, we all have different opinions and perspectives, We're not all the same. If we were all the same, it would be like one-minded. It's going to be weird, boring. So, we're all different. Also, give the person the benefit of the doubt. So just, if that individual, let's say how the first approach is, it's unreliable, right? And this person, you're known, like, I know if we all met someone that you don't trust them, you're known, like, I know I come across some people who I just can't, like, trust, or in a way, like, I don't believe them. So it's like, if you don't believe them and they're about to tell you something, you're like, oh, okay, let's say, person A is coming up to me like, oh, here comes this person. I already know they're gonna be telling me stories, and I just don't want to hear it. Like, I don't even believe them. You know what? Give the person benefit of the doubt. Hear them out. Maybe they just want to be heard. Sometimes people just want to be heard. Listen to them. Don't hear them out. Listen to them. Actually listen to them. Because you don't know. Maybe it's going to help them out. Maybe they just want to be listened to. And also, let's say something actually happens where your feelings got hurt because someone was hurtful towards you. Maybe they're not aware of it, like I was saying. Ask the individual what just happened. Like right away, be like, hey, in a nice way, like, hey, sorry, Jason. Hey, Jason, you know what? You kind of hurt my feelings. I don't know if you noticed, but it was kind of hurtful what you said. Maybe Jason didn't even notice. Knowing Jason, he's not hurtful at all. But but yeah, I use him. He's cool. And then okay, and just So sometimes if you're coming across someone, be there for them. Listen to them. Be who Christ wants us to be. So the closing remarks are, when someone is dismissive towards others, many times they would find a way to show their displeasure. So like in the first story, how Nabal was dismissive towards David's man that he sent out, it brought consequences. So as we saw, the whole family was about to die because of his dismissive attitude. And then the second thing is, one should become more aware of their own behavior. So as we say stuff and we think about stuff and we our certain actions, be more aware of it, because sometimes we may not be of it. Everybody has a busy life. Like, everybody has things to do. We're going back and forth doing stuff, and sometimes we're either tired or you're excited. And I know when I'm like super excited, my energy goes up. And sometimes I'm really excited that I feel like my brain is working fast, and I don't notice I'm saying stuff, and I'm like, oh snap, let me tone down my energy, because and then sorry, I guess my energy just went up because that did not make sense at all. So okay, so for instance, when I drink coffee, right? It's like sometimes it kicks in right away, and sometimes it doesn't. But let's say it does kick right away. I feel like my energy's up here, and I'm like talking fast, mega fast, and I'm just thinking about stuff. And next thing you know, like I'm talking to someone from my family, and I'm like telling them stuff. And next thing you know, I'm like, what up? Is there anything you want to say? Because I'm straight out just shutting you off, and I'm just over here like focusing on everything. And I have been the dismisser, I'm noticing that now. But I did notice that in the past. But sorry. Okay. But yeah. So another thing is, just because one doesn't think a certain way about a certain matter doesn't mean you can be dismissive to those who act or think differently. So I know, like I mentioned before, we all have different perspective and different ways of thinking. Let's not be dismissive towards other because you don't agree with it. We all have different point of views, like I was saying in the past. We all think differently. It's okay that we all think differently. We're not all going to agree at the same time. So they say at work you disagree with someone. It's okay that you disagree, but don't be the dismisser and shut them out because you don't agree with it and you want it your way. Instead, be like, hear them out, hear their perspective. If you don't agree with it after hearing them out, okay, you don't agree with them, but don't straight out close them off just because you're in a disagreement. Lastly, listen attentively and purposely to others and make every effort to fully address and understand their concerns. So this would be very useful for all your relationships. So friends, family, you make great relationship when you actually listen to someone sincerely, when you ask them about their day, or just when you talk about life, sometimes you go into deep conversations when you talk about life in general. There's so much to talk about, or just a movie, listen to people and understand their concerns instead of just pretty much closing off and putting that boundary. I know sometimes it's hard to bring down those boundaries, Because I know for myself, I tend to, in the last few months, I put up more walls in around myself. Things happen, so I put up more walls, and it's harder for me to trust people. But just in general, it's who I am. You after a while, sometimes you watch certain shows and you're like, like Criminal Minds. You watch this couple shows and you're like, you don't trust people, but it's okay. Like I know some people have it easy and they could just go up to people and like talk to them. I for one can't. But like sometimes you gotta open up and be able to talk to people and not, straight out close off yourself. But I just want to leave you guys with these two verses. So I know for me, when I came across this individual that I was being the dismisser and didn't want to hear anything from this individual, it took a couple of months for me to finally be able to talk to them, have a conversation, and be good. I had to pray about it a lot and ask God to help me because my heart was becoming more hardened, more closed off. So when that happens and you catch yourself or someone calls you out on your behavior, accept it. It's going to be hard, because no one wants to hear that. But be able to just be like, you know what? I hear you. If someone tells you, I may not like what you're telling me, but, thank you for letting me know. I know for myself, I had to pray about it and constantly ask God to help me out and give me the heart that he wants me to have to be more Christ-like. So in Galatians 5, verse 14, it says, "For the whole law can be summed up in this one command, love your neighbor as yourself." So what's the greatest thing? Love. Love could fix anything. Christ died for us. He loves us. I hope, and with love can transform you. So when you allow God in your heart and allow him to help you out through several things, you allow yourself to be more Christ-like, be the person he wants you to be. It's a process, it takes work. And in Romans chapter 12, verse 2, it says, don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. So I know sometimes we may be, rushing, busy, back and forth. Maybe at work we see stuff, or school we see stuff too. And people, you catch on behavior. Sometimes we copy people, and we have to remember we shouldn't be doing that. It's hard because sometimes we accidentally, copy those behavior and become that person that we shouldn't be. So if one's having a dismissive attitude or just a different attitude that you're not supposed to, or a different behavior, ask God to help you out, and he will transform you. It takes a process, but like the verse was saying, we shouldn't be accustomed to this world or its behaviors. We should be more Christ-like, be the light in this world, and be who God made us to be. And, we're not perfect. We all have our flaws and make mistakes, but in the end, if we ask God, he'll help us out. You just got to ask him, keep praying about it, and just, if you see it and you do it, if you caught yourself doing it, you just got to work on it, and it's a process because, things happen. As long as you see it and you work on it and you ask God to help you, God sees that. He sees that we're working on it, and he helps us out. So, yeah, I just want to leave you guys with those two verses. Ask and you shall receive. I know that's another verse, but to be more like him, be more Christ-like. And with that, next week, we're going to be talking about the critical attitude, and that's the subtopic for week 2. And yeah, that's it. So, okay. So with that being